Great. So,
Right.
a very, very warm welcome to another in the series of APMP webinars. And as always, at APMP, our endeavor is to promote the professional growth of our members. And through our various events, forums, platforms, we've tried to cover a wide spectrum of themes from across the bids and proposing space. Right. Today, we're discussing a very significant theme, which is on proposal pricing. And we all know responding to RFPs can be a bit daunting purely because of this element and the blind nature of the competition. However, the right pricing strategy can turn an RFP into a game-changing opportunity. So RFP pricing is a powerful weapon in our arsenal, but only if it is used well. To demystify and this oft-dreaded and critical piece, we today have Shailendra Marathe. He's the virtual CFO Access, and he comes with 25 years of leadership experience in diverse industries across the globe: corporate finance, investment banking, fintech, and risk management. He's been a business advisor and startup mentor, and he's also authored a book, Price to Profit, which is a book on pricing strategy for growth and profitability. So very warm welcome to you, Shail. And I think together with you today, we'd like to actually demystify, as I said, this interesting topic and learn a little more along the way. So just before...
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to the APMP professionals. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Keen to hear you. And just as we begin, just a little bit of some ground rules there. We certainly would encourage questions, and you can either put them in the chat window or raise your hands, and we can address them towards the end of the session to avoid any disconnects and disturbances during the middle of the session, right? So let's first things first, Shail. A survey across about 6,000 RFP decision, what was really seen is that the least expensive proposal won in only 10% of all the projects. And conversely, the most expensive proposal went ahead and won 2.9% of the time. And this finding shows that while price is important, it is rarely the be all and end all that is often assumed to be, right? So from your experience, right, why do you think we should offer choice and options to customers, and how does it really help?
Correct. So I think what you mentioned is correct. While the government contracts, largely if you see that T1 L1 kind of sort of obsession is there with the government for various reasons. The Controller and Auditor General coming and asking why you give to somebody who asked quoted 1 rupee more price, right? So, but apart from that, in the private enterprises in specific, price is not the only criteria. It is not the only determining criteria to make a decision. What you want is what is the value that is being delivered to you. Absolutely. Right? That's absolutely important. And what the customer actually wants is the best return on investment. So if I put $10,000 somewhere and just get 20,000, instead I don't mind putting $50,000 there and maybe get 2 lakh or something like that, right? So I'm getting the best value for my money. So value is most important, and value gets converted to the choice, right? So that's fundamentally what I would like to propose. And maybe the proposals which have won, they offered a better value. And what they did is, rather than merely meeting maybe the customer requirements at the base level, saying that okay, you want a shirt and you want a cotton shirt, this is it, right? Maybe they went ahead and explored the requirements more. Maybe they added value. They know something more about customers' business by talking to other competitors out there, right? There's a lot of things that could have gone behind making that proposal which won, in spite of quoting a higher price. Because price is not the only determining criteria, but Absolutely. How you convey the price is also extremely important. So I think all of us are used to the Amazons and Flipkarts of the world today, right? So if you go to a typical Amazon screen, what do we see there, right? So we don't just see a single price, correct? There is usually a big one, which is the price at which we are offered, which is in red, bold, and it's a considerable less price, right? Then they say something like which is the usual price. They show the competing products, right, which are mostly at the higher price when we take the decision, right? So one of the criteria, of course, is price. We'll of course go for a brand, etc. I'm not saying that is not important. So how their price is conveyed, and that price is conveyed, how much less you are paying is converted in percentage terms as well as in amount terms. And there is a science behind that. 1 rupee discount doesn't sound much, but 10% sounds more, right? So it looks like, okay, I'm getting 10% discount, right? So what to highlight? Should you highlight the percentage? Should it be in the bold and big font, or should it be rupee, right? So depending on what it is, how you convey the price is extremely important, and not just the price itself, right? So that's probably what they have done better in those proposals.
Yeah. So interesting, Shell, and especially coming from a pricing expert, you say pricing is not actually, you validate the fact that it is not the only criterion. And you speak about value, and you also speak about not just, embedding that value and the option, but it is also about how we communicate that value, because it has to really mean something for the client, right? And when we talk, certainly when we are talking value, it is not something which is defined by features, right? It is like actually about how you really change the equation for the customer. And that reminds me of an interesting anecdote I actually read about the US Air Force, which is the biggest outsourcer of services in the world. And I'm sure, Shell, you're familiar with that. And while they were asked to put out an RFP to maintain their fighter jets in foreign countries, now most of their jets are on the ground and they clearly can't perform the tasks the Air Force needs them to. And therefore, it is imperative that they're on the ground for as short a time as possible. So when this RFP was presented, the bidder who really succeeded was actually a person who really came up with a very unique solution. And he, very simple questions, common sense questions that were asked. What is the really true value that the Air Force is seeking? And what business are they really in? And they presented the price not as really a part of, not as a price per part. It was actually the price per number of service hours, but as a price per number of hours in the air, right? And I think that is what you are referring to. It is demonstrating value for the customer, right? So can you tell us a little more on this piece, Shell, in terms of how do you really demonstrate value, delivering options?
Yeah. So I think just in the same context that you mentioned, it was one of the the airlines which sort of bucked the trend and went on to become an economy airline in US, and very successfully with the best turnaround time, the minimum time at the airports, and planes flying for the maximum time, that turned out to be very successful business, and it has actually changed the entire airline industry today. Correct. So that's how the industry looks at it now. Fundamentally, what we are looking at here is, can you give the customer some kind of a choice based on your understanding of the situation? So many times the proposals are at a slight disadvantage when they come as compared to typical only products or services offering, right? So proposal is in response to something. So customer has already thought through, this is what I want, right? And then responding to that. Many times the people who are handling the proposals, they are not sort of willing to look at too many options, and they say, okay, this is what we want, and you just give this, right? So you have to fight through that and sort of create a choice. Correct. So that's very important. So for you to offer the choice, you need to understand the customer requirement and the solution extremely well, right? And we see that for mobile phones, etc., this has become like a science. For cars, this has become like a science, right? So when we go to buy a car, we get typical choice, right? LX, VX, XI, something like that, right? Sometimes there are too many choices with the company being there for a very long time, but you get let's say three choices, where there's a base model, and then there is something better, and then there's something a high-end model, right? And there's a reason why the car companies offer this, right? Because the entire base model is same for all these three, right? They are exploiting a lot of economies of scale when they are driving that, and only few features they are adding on top of that to make it sort of differentiate, as well as to sell better, because each customer has better requirements, and the one who buys the high-end model, he is having a more satisfaction of being a differentiated customer. So understanding the customer's requirement is extremely important. So a person who's submitting the proposal, the vendor, he needs to understand the business as good as the customer. And that's why, over the period of time, the domain experts assumed a lot of importance in this area, correct? As you know, the way even IT industry has involved, right? Slowly the domain experts started participating. And for example, if you look at somebody looking at a proposal for high frequency trading, right? So HFT. So do you understand that domain? What is most critical in that? What do the traders do? What is their mindset? Why that millisecond of response matters to them? And then you design the entire proposal accordingly. Because if you give them that response, better response, then that is the proposal which is going to win the bid, correct? Because for them there are thousand customers with high-end technology competing with each other to put to that order and strike the deal. And that
Sure.
1 millisecond that you can save for the customer is very important. So understanding the customer needs, what exactly are the business drivers and what is the most critical thing that the customer wants, is extremely important for you to create a choice.
Absolutely. So I think bang on, and I think we keep hearing this so many times, time and again in different contexts. Whenever we talk about bids and proposals, right? It is a response to a solution, right? It isn't something that, how you perceive it. It is all about the customer. It is all about them, right? And similarly, when you're talking about value, it is the perceived value by them, right? So how is it that, you're pricing it according, and they see value about it. Now, moving a little bit more on this, when basis your experience, how many do you think are there? Is there a kind of a threshold in terms of the number of options we should provide Shell, and meaning any number that we should really kind of aim for? And how do you really link price to the options that we're offering?
Right. So as I said, first thing is understanding the customer and creating the choices of the options for them, right? So, if you see, if there are too many options, many times we get confused, right? It's very difficult for us to evaluate between, let's say, 15 options, which are essentially the similar kind of a solution, right? But it is very difficult to distinguish between option 1 and option 7 versus option 12 or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, you may want to confuse the customer. In some cases, it can work, but I think normally you need to educate and handle the customer, right? It's a partnership. So you need to sort of be sure as to what is the maximum number of options you want to provide to the customer, right? And there is a lot of studies that have been done by psychiatrists, economics, and so psychologists, etc., which say anywhere between 3 to 5 options human beings would like to have, right? Anything less than 3, we usually don't like. It's called yes no pricing. So typically, you are saying, take it or leave it, I don't care, correct? So this is the proposal, this is what we are going to give you, and this is the price, $16,000, and thank you very much. You are okay with 16, we are okay, right? That is also something that you should avoid. Of course, yes no pricing is something you should try to avoid, but you shouldn't give too many choices. And typically the consensus is that anywhere between 3 to 5 choices is sort of a golden equation for you to make the customer understand what is the value, what is the differentiation between these options, and why he's paying something. And I'll later talk about it, how you drive him towards something that you think is the best for that customer, right? So that's what it is. A lot of studies have been done in that. I'll recommend one book for the pricing experts to read, and that's not on pricing, by the way. So it is by Daniel Kahneman. So the Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, right? Many of us would have read that book, and it's about it's from a guy who has 2 Nobel Prizes to his credit. He's an economist and a mathematician. And if you know, in Discovery, they used to show a program in the evening called, I think, Brain Games or something like that. And in that, they had demonstrated and he and his erstwhile colleague Amos, who died slightly younger, and they conducted thousands of experiments, and hundreds of them were on price, right? So and he's totally about how people take decisions and how we think, how human mind thinks, and he divides into system 1 and system 2. So so our mind is lazy, right? We want to reach conclusions faster, and somebody who gives us right kind of inputs to take our decision faster, we like those people, correct? Somebody coming and explaining to you, okay, you buy this phone, it suits your needs better, and he's really genuinely trying to match your needs. You like to buy from that particular salesperson, right? And next time we go to that shop, we look for that salesperson, right? So you be that salesperson who's educating the customer, he's giving him optimum choices, which typically has been found to be between 3 to 5, because as humans, it's very difficult to deal with too many choices and differentiate.
Okay, it's very interesting, Shell, and I think you cover a lot of aspects there, and as varied as completely not brass facts on pricing, and technical expertise is not what pricing is about. I think there's a lot of aspects about the psychology and the psyche of the person who's buying it, and at the end of it all, it's a human being who's taking that decision making, right? So not to less, not to more is what you're recommending, and that is a range of 3 to 5 options, and where with very clear differentiators, and that is where and I think another element you subtly point out is help them, enable them to arrive at a quick decision, right? If they're going to take them too long, they aren't going to feel too happy about it. Yeah. So And this is interesting. But then, when we actually do this, Shell, meaning basis your experience again, have you seen any challenges, that you've seen, people while they are implementing these strategy of, providing these options? What are the core challenges that one can encounter?
Right. So first and foremost challenge is, for to change the customer mindset that, we want to give more options, right? So sometimes the receiver is not sort of, looking at just give us this plain vanilla kind of a thing. So I think you need to educate them, why you're showing them 2, 3 options. The second is, the your own, I think the domain capabilities, right? I'll say the understanding of that particular nature of business, right? And it could be a technology driven product in which then the technology becomes domain, right? It could be something like that. So
Yeah,
having that understanding is something that is a challenge, right? If you don't understand customers' business, his problem, solution very, very well, then that actually becomes a challenge. You can create a solution for that, right? Unless you know that. The third thing is, can you clearly see different options yourself, right? Can you create options that are meaningful, right? Not just for the sake of creating, correct? So
mm-hmm.
is option 1, option 2, and option 3, let's say you give them 3 options, can you
Yeah,
clearly rank them and see, what are the different features or
mm-hmm.
benefits that the customer is getting in, let's say 2, which are not there in 1, and what you're getting in 3, which are not there in 1 and 2,
Okay.
right? So that clear ability to go down to the level of those benefits, features, whatever you want to call that, right? That
Mm.
is extremely important. And if you don't have that ability, you don't have that capability, then of course you cannot create a right kind of a choice for the customer. And then
Correct.
the next thing is, those benefits are supposed to create the value. So are you really offering them or distinguishing on the basis of benefits, option 1, 2, 3, on the basis of value delivered, or they are just benefits from your point of view, right? And we know
Mm.
this, right? What is essentially a benefit need not be carrying that much value for the customer. And sometimes what you feel is a small benefit or a feature could be a fantastic value for the customer.
Correct.
So are you able to, sort of put those together and create that particular, let's say a stack of choices where the customer can very clearly see, what is the value that I'm getting in each of these choices, and then, he can accordingly take a business decision. So that itself is a very, very big challenge. And then of course creating that and then articulating, presenting it to the customer and answering his query is also a challenge. So you need to, manage all this process very, very clearly.
Yeah. So, and I think, while it seems very simple, and I think at the heart of it, it is the customer and their choices. But at the end of it, I think it is we are driving them towards making a certain right choice. Right. Any tips, Shell, from your side in terms of really, are there any kind of ways of how we could really drive the customer to a desired option or a choice? And anything at all, any tips there will be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as I said, understanding the customer need is extremely important. Sometimes, customer is not able to articulate it. And I think this is seen many times because, on the customer side, if you're dealing with a business organization, there are a lot of stakeholders. Everybody puts in his requirement, right?
Yeah.
And who's the user at the end of the day? Many times the decision makers are not the end users, correct? So you need to understand that landscape very well and what exactly is something that people would prefer, because who's going to be the people who are going to, vote on this. For example, again, let me go back to the same example of a car, right? So let's say there are 3 versions, and you see the the base version is something that most people would not like to go for. Trying to go for a car between, let's say, 10 to 15 lakhs, correct? I want it to be a differentiated car. I don't want to be a Nano or a Wagoner or something. I want it to be, it has to differentiate itself. And that is number one. So not go for a base version which, for example, doesn't have all windows rolling down automatically, etc., etc. Those features
Sure.
is something that you want if you are paying so much, correct?
Sure.
Then the topmost version, typically, again, you will give them some features and maybe put 2 lakh rupees price more, those features which customer would not value that much. And typically, I mean, having bought a car last year, I think about a year and a half back, I did study a lot of these, out of my interest as well. I saw the features that the high-end models were offering typically between, these 3 stack is that, they were having these follow home headlights, right? So the headlights will stay on for 10 seconds, right? If you park in a garage, right? So the lights will not go off once you switch off, or the headlights will start automatically if there is no sufficient light, or if there is a rain, then automatically wipers will start, right? Who wants these features, right? I mean, I can see rain is there, I can start the wipers, and it's so easy in today's cars to do that. It's so easy to switch off the light, right? So the kind of features they are giving additional in most of these cases for just 1.5 to 2 lakh rupees difference is absolutely nothing, right? You don't want those features. And then what you're doing is, on the one hand, you are giving them something that really an aspirational customer is not likely to go for. On the other hand, you are giving them features. You are definitely giving them features. It's not like you're not giving them, but they don't value it that much, correct? Follow me home lights and automatic wipers. I mean, why do wipers have to start automatically? I will start it, right? So those features are the distinction one. Then they are driving you automatically to the middle option, right? Which is best for them in terms of how they manufacture their own economy, logistics, and everything. That works best for the company as well, and they know this is the best value for the customer. But if they tell the customer this is the best value for you and we are offering only one model, then most likely they will not go for that, right? So you need to still create those three choices. The base is same, and you have minimum accessories getting added, etc. And then you drive them to a choice which they can easily distinguish, and the salesperson has to take that effort. Then he will ask, sir, but ठीक है, I mean most of the people don't value this, right? So क्या इसका जरूरत है क्या आपको, उसके लिए आप 1.5 लाख क्यों पे कर रहे हो? अच्छा, आपको टायर का ये चॉइसेस है तो मैं करके देता हूँ, you pay 20,000 more, right? So you, instead of paying 1.5 lakh rupees more in 20,000, you are getting that deal, right? So you go for that deal. So there is a way of sort of not forcing. I'm not saying you can't force a customer, right? Sort of in an educated way, walking customer to the right choice that exactly satisfies his needs.
I think, Shell, very, very beautifully put. And I think what you're talking about is not just about a deep understanding of the customer, but actually that is basically a difference between a seller, pure seller, and a partner and a consultant. And I think the space we are treading on today, especially with the competition, all that competition around we hear, what will succeed is partners and consultants, right? Because I think if at the event, at the end of it, when you're talking about selling, which involves so much money, it is all about trust. Do I trust the person in front of me? And if I see that trust coming, and the advice, I heed to that advice, I think I'm actually going to come back to you again and again. So while we talk pricing, we're talking about technical expertise, we're talking ways of solutioning of how to do it. But I think it's a lot about the human psyche, and that's interesting. So Ashal, we have one question that's coming from Abhijit, and here it is. In an average deal, there can be multiple decision makers for whom pricing can be a decisive factor. Who do you think could be the target for pricing for a bid manager?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I think this is a very valid question. And, specifically in the scenario where you have multiple stakeholders, right? It is very important and very difficult also for you to, decide who's going to ultimately accept the price, right? So the value probably is being delivered to X, correct? So X could be, let's say, if I am selling a CRM system. Now, the people who are going to value it are the sales people. But probably the ones who are going to approve it are, of course, sales head will be there, but there's also a CFO and CEO who is going to do that, right? So this is where, that value definitely has to be targeting the salespeople, right? It has to target the salespeople, but it has to be articulated in such a way that he's going to be your champion in the organization. And I think as proposition management professionals, you know it very, very well. You have to make it very, very easy for him to, put it and sell it to CFO and CEO, correct? CFO specifically, because he's going to just look at the numbers and, say this vendor and that vendor and something. For him, it is difficult to, maybe if it's a finance and accounting system, he might have better insight, but in the sales function, he might have to rely on specifically the value aspect. On the so that you have to very strongly value, you have to very, very strongly convey to the salesperson, so that you can sell the price to the CFO, correct? So that's a sort of mix of both of these. The price is targeted at CFO, but the value has to be targeted at the salesperson, so that the sales head can convince, though we are paying, let's say, 20% more for this, but this is the value we are getting, right? So there's a, this system, when it automatically captures the leads, and, we can sort of allocate the leads automatically, and this can be done, and conversion is better and all that, right? So that has to be demonstrated to the end users of the system. So value to the end user, and maybe price to target more the CFO, but they have to both combine, and both of them, they have to be aware that, both these are involved in the decision making process.
Yeah. So yes, I think the net what we are talking about it, there are multiple decision makers. So when we are really pricing, we need to be actually bearing in mind who will be the people who will influence that decision, right? So there will be people who will really people who are selling, and there are people who will take the finance decision, which is the CFO, and there will be ultimate users, the business, the consumers of your product product or a service, and how do they really see value. And that's important. If they don't see that, buying ain't happening, right? So in very interesting aspects. And I think as I write, do not see any more questions coming in, but let me ask you a few more questions, just purely out of curiosity. So whenever we do talk about providing options, and we said we've got to give three options, many a times what we've seen is that people go by the book as a checklist. Okay, they will provide those options, but if you were really look at it, there aren't really, those really don't feature as out as options, right? If you were to actually guide people and tell that, are there any kind of tips and tricks to keep in mind when you're saying how to really bring out that differentiation, especially in the demonstration?
Yeah. So I think one is, we should learn a lot from the other industries, right? So let's say if we are talking about maybe consulting, IT, etc., a lot of experience that can be gained by, as I was saying, by how automobile manufacturers do it. Let's say how Pizza Hut does it or how McDonald's does it, right? So I think it's very important to look at them. And we very frequently, I think it's an overused example, but I think very good example of popcorn at the movie theaters, correct? So there are typically, the small popcorn cups, and there's a middle size and there's a large size, right? And the pricing is there accordingly. And then the volume of popcorn is there is, typically, let's say the small one targets hardly one person or maximum two persons meals will be made, right? When they eat that popcorn. And then the second one and third one. And so I think very important for us to see how clearly that value is getting conveyed. And I think these sort of, consumer oriented businesses, specifically on the product side, do a very, very good, I think they're done very, very well in terms of, distinguishing this. If you look at Apple, how it launches their phones, right? So a phone is a phone, right? But typically starting from, let's say, $699 and $999 and $1,499 and maybe $1,999, right? What are the kind of additional features that they are presenting, correct? So it's very important for us to study those industries and look at what actually matters to the customer, correct? So I can't give a specific example unless you ask me a very specific question. That's why I gave the example of a motor car, for example, where I could clearly see, that wipers starting automatically or headlights coming up automatically makes no sense to me. If I'm blind, I mean, I should not be driving the car, correct? Otherwise, I can do it myself at the flick of a button. So I can see that there is no, it's not a feature, right? It's not going to give me much value. But I mean, they are trying to distinguish that. They may have some one or two features which I have missed out. But something that the customer can very clearly see what is the return that I'm getting out at that particular feature. Do I want it or not, right? That is most important. Many times the technical features of our product, etc., are not that important to the customer. So don't talk about them, right? So if the phone is sort of, the grip is good. Nowadays, most of the phones, the problem is, it will fall off very easily. So we have to put a cover around that and the whole beauty gets lost, correct? So if your phone is having some kind of a non-slippery design, which also looks beautiful, right? That's a great feature to convey to the customer. We have put in more efforts to make sure that the phone doesn't easily slip out of your hand. Right? After long-lasting battery is a very good feature, right? It's long-lasting battery in a phone is extremely important for anybody, correct? And I think it's a great feature that you can emphasize a lot upon. And I think a lot of technology investment is going in that area. So you need to understand what exactly, again, I'll come back to the same thing, what exactly that the customer wants in that area, right? So that's why doing these focus group discussions, sort of surveys, interactions, maybe allowing people in your organization to use that product before it goes out, or asking questions to maybe in the case of services, asking questions to others in your organization, because many times we are blindsided. If you are trying to sell a CRM solution to somebody, are we talking to our salespeople, right? What will their reaction be, right? Maybe we'll not sort of talk to our entire sales team. Only some people might talk about this product and they are more in the sales mode, right? So not sort of trying to understand, look at the product as what they will consume. So some basic things if we do, we'll be able to very clearly understand these features, benefits, value, price, all that can be very easily worked out.
Yeah, very interesting again there, Shell. I think we're talking about, that there will be a differentiation based on the industry, even in terms of the segmentation, right? Are you you're talking, because you've been giving the example of the car, are you talking, luxury car segment? Are you talking about, so depending upon what exactly is your customer looking for. And so you can't sell an Alto to a person who's looking for a Merc, right? And vice versa. So that piece becomes important. Moving on, I think a very important element is competition, right? Pricing versus, and I think that's a dreaded place. Why we say, okay, how do we give options? How do we really do it? How important is the understanding of competition pricing, to this whole factor of pricing, and what are kind of some of the best ways to do it?
Yeah. So, and I think most of the bidding situations are competitive, and in many cases, we do know who are our competitors, right? So, especially like IT services, consulting space, there are limited number of players, and the customers also work with typically 5, 6, 7 vendors nowadays, right? So, we know who is the competition, and we might have some insights into what they typically offer, right? So, having that knowledge is extremely important. What the competitors are telling, how they are conveying that particular are they giving choice, are they not giving choice, are they sort of trying to undercut us in this bid, for example, sometimes giving a low bid to get into an account, like new logo, for example, new logo acquisition. I remember we used to have a lot of play in terms of pricing if new logo was being acquired, correct? I was in the banking segment all along, so if you're acquiring a new logo, you can give a very good price, correct? Throwing a lot of stuff. So, but that alone will not clinch the deal for you. End of the day, the customer is looking for some value from that particular assignment, the project, and you have to make sure that that value is being delivered. But having understanding of competition is extremely important, and then only you can work around what benefits you are articulating, what features, benefits, value, and choice you are giving. That is extremely important. And as I said, stick to the basics. Sometimes the competitors might follow the similar kind of a practice, right? So you cannot do much about it. I mean, getting too worried about exactly what the competition is doing, at times you might, in trying to distinguish, maybe will not present something to the customer that is really the customer requires, correct? So having that confidence is extremely important. Sometimes your proposal might be similar to the competition, so that can happen. So doing artificial differentiation is something that we should not try to avoid, because the customer can make it out. They may at times say, we have got similar proposals, etc., and then maybe you can sort of get into more conversation to find out then what is it that is the final criteria for selection, correct? And there are many non-price related criteria for selection. Like I have participated in a lot of deals, for example, rebadging of the existing employees, right? So one who's good at that, they won the deal, right? So I've seen that, $100 million kind of contracts, and that's actually was a deal clincher, because there were 2, 3 big vendors in the competition. Somebody had quoted around 91 million, somebody 97 million, and somebody in between that, right? So customer was not, and it's a 3-year contract, so it's not big for the big, one of the largest investment banks in the world. But then what means the contract? We are very good at rebadging your existing employees, which means that they can reduce their staff, which they wanted to reduce. Actually, behind that, they are not explicitly mentioned that, and then we can absorb them, and we are a good company, and they will work with us, right? So that you discover in the subsequent conversation, because that can be then your focus. Price, again, I'll say, it's not end all, right? It's not the only thing that is going to win you, but it will take you to a place where now you can have those more in-depth sort of conversations as to what is it that you are going to be a deal clincher for us, right? And if you don't know that, otherwise you'll not reach that stage where you can offer that kind of a deal clincher. And in that case, where I have seen, that was the factor that won that particular bid, and not the price or the choice itself, correct? But you get onto the table to discuss that in more depth.
Sure. So shall we have another question? And what if the customer is really not indicating the budget they have and their perceived value? How do you really define a safe pricing window to play in?
Right. So I think, yeah. So I think having a good handle into the customer's organization is extremely important for any salesperson. Yeah. And in fact, if we are into proposal building, we would expect our salesperson to have that kind of a chemistry, right? And he's the guy who's supposed to go for a breakfast and coffee, etc., and get that kind of information from the customer. But in many situations, we know that the customer may not sort of give, because the customer may not have. Many times we feel that the customer is hiding from us, but what he doesn't know, he cannot tell us, right? Maybe something entirely new, and he's also trying to talk to 3, 4 vendors and sort of develop ideas. What should be my budget, or what is the range that I should be going up? What is the minimum thing I should be spending and maximum? So then, So then, safe window. There's nothing like a safe window. I think you should, again, I'll say you stick to the basics, right? So you may win some, you may lose some, and again, it's about the education of the customer. Sometimes I've seen the customers getting shocked with very, very low pricing, correct? So there's nothing like a safe window. Also, I think you go and appropriately price it. If you don't know the value that the customer wants, then I think you need to do more research in your domain, correct? What is the value that the customer broad understanding you will have. and the customer is in this domain. These are the kind of their customers. You know, so many employees. This is the productivity benefit, right? This is the benefit in let's say saving the compliance cost, right? And etc. etc. So you know that these are the benefits that customer is likely to receive, and then you price accordingly. I can't say that there is a safe window beyond that. You may win some and you may lose some. I think that's a part of the game. But stick to your, whatever you understand about the customer, what value they are getting, and link the price to that.
Yeah.
Link the price to value, or what we call ROI based pricing or value based pricing is the biggest thing, specifically in the B2B context, and educate the customer. Why are we offering this price and this particular choice, and how is it going to be the best value for the customer? That is the only thing that I can say. Beyond that, I think there are no sort of safe windows,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I can
Beautifully put, and I think time and again, in very different ways, Shell, you've been trying to actually reiterate, so and to sum it up, at least what I take away is we really have to really focus on the problem, really that caused them to use this RFP process in the first place, and then actually define that value metric that provides the solution to them, right? And therefore, you've got to understand what exactly is the client buying versus what you're selling to them, right? What do they really need and what would be valuable to them? So I think every step of the way, if we can really pause, think, and actually put ourselves in the shoes of the customer, and sometimes ask ourselves very simple, commonsensical questions, we may the pricing conundrum as we talk it is not going to be as complex. So I think I don't see any more questions. Any other questions? We would welcome. We have some time there. Any of the participants? Any questions from your side? Please raise your hand or put it in the chat box.
Shashi, I'll just give a reverse, sort of example in this, right? Not about pricing. Sure. I was talking to one of the company founders, and they are a very well-known study. They are into the fintech segment, and they're their first investor. So they were looking for investors. They had a good reputation in the market, and the product had to be developed, everything. But they had a good reputation in their previous careers, so they were confident of getting the investors. So one of the investors, they offered him a higher equity and got him on board, right? Than what they were thinking of, because that investor understood that beyond investment, what did they want, right? And he had an NBFC license in one of his many companies that he gave it to them. And since this was a fintech, they wanted an NBFC license. That saved them at least 6 months, right? And so other way around, right? I'm talking of an investment scenario, but I mean, here also you're trying to sell something. We're all trying to sell something to each other. He was trying to get the stake in that company, and I think they were looking at something like 5% for that, and they ended up giving him 10% because he said, okay, I'm going to give you NBFC license as well, right? So I'm going to save you 6 months. And imagine, go to market 6 months saving today in today's market is so big, and this was a few years back. Right, so discovering what the customer wants is extremely important, and then there are no specific guidelines about how you go about discovering that. That's entirely the thing about the sales process and the salesperson's chemistry. But once you know that, then we can try to put some value and price around that. How we would have probably asked for 10%.
Good examples, Shell, and I think at the core of it is like peeling of an onion. So, don't be satisfied with the initial hypothesis, if we were to talk about it, really get to the core of it and really understand, is that the real value? Is it what they are looking for? And like I think through the conversation pointed out, many a times customers themselves don't know what they are looking for. They are in the midst of a problem. And, when we get into a consultative, mode and when we talk to them, it's a kind of discovery process of exploration. And many a times, I think you may end up, creating bonds, which will, lead beyond pricing and profits, the immediate profits, as we do talk about. So it's a more of a long-term game, especially when you talk value. And it's definitely not only determined by pricing. And with that, I think, Shell, we don't see too many questions at the moment. So I'll actually have to close. I would just like to thank you so much. And this was a very insightful conversation. And, I'm sure that there was a lot of learning for all of us. Just for the attendees and other people, this webinar is going to be available on YouTube. So please log in, check in, and look and of course put in your comments. Keep sharing suggestions in terms of what you'd like to hear from us, and we'd be more than happy to really have that. So thanks, Shell. Thank you so much once again, and thanks, Rupesh, for facilitating this.
Thanks, Ajit. Thanks, Rupesh. Thank you.